The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
And of course, you are listening to us at our Durian Heat, the second segment of the day where we discuss on critical issue. And this time, I think it's a critical issue in Malaysia's juncture in terms of taxi service.
And it could be also very positive critical issues. We're going to talk about it.
And we are talking about revolutionizing the cab service. In specific, we are talking about Uber, the service itself. And we have a representative from Uber. Maybe you want to share.
His name is Foong, and he's the general manager of Uber company in Malaysia. So let's say good morning to him.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can I just say I love the name of your channel?
Oh, you love the fruit as well.
Yeah, both.
So tell us more about yourself and how did you get involved with this cab application, I would say.
Okay, I think, first of all, let me just clarify. We're actually not a taxi application. We're just a simple kind of software app which matches any kind of consumer, any rider who needs a ride to someone who's actually able to provide that kind of transportation service, right? So what we actually are, we're a technology company. Uber is a technology company that provides an application that matches riders to drivers, right? And how did I get involved? I'm going to say, kind of growing up, I was always kind of really interested in technology. I came from a finance background. I worked for a local company that kind of specialized in kind of 4G technology. And, before joining Uber, I was actually helping to kind of roll out 4G technology to schools and kind of consumers across Malaysia. And naturally, when the opportunity of kind of Uber came about, I thought this was very interesting, right? I think it's a disruptive technology in a space where I think all of us can relate to.
You make a lot of haters. Very destructive.
Well, we like to think that, there are always both sides to the coin or to the equation. There'll always be some people who support the brand. There's some people who don't understand the brand, but I think it's our mission to win them over.
Yeah, but tell us more about the history of Uber, because it come out of nowhere from Germany, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, the idea, you correctly kind of pointed out, was started in Paris. So I think approximately 5 years ago, right, two of our founders, Garrett and Travis, they were in Paris, and suddenly they had an idea, whereby they found that it was so difficult to actually flag down a taxi.
Same in Malaysia as well.
And, they both of them are from San Francisco, where they kind of realized that it was actually really difficult getting a taxi, especially during peak hours.
True.
Right? There's so many taxis, but why is it so difficult to get, a taxi during peak hours? And during that time, kind of 5 years ago, there happened to be, a brand which we're quite familiar with. I think it's called Apple, right? They were kind of like selling the new product back then. It's called the iPhone. And they thought to themselves, what if, we could create an application on the iPhone, which makes it so simple for someone to just book a ride with just a tap of a button. Right? That was the whole basic premise of the idea. So when they came back from from Paris to San Francisco, they actually decided to work on this app and they launched it, right, 5 years ago. So it was actually started in the US. And what the company really realized was that, okay, initially, this app was just meant to be built for their friends, right? It was like for my friends and family so that we can book a ride after a night out. But then they realized, hey, this app is actually getting quite incredibly popular. And what if we can bring the same level of convenience, right, the same level of reliability to the masses, right, all across the world? And I guess, after that, they started launching in cities like Paris, Sydney, Singapore. I think Malaysia and Southeast Asia was actually the second country to be launched.
Oh.
Yeah. And why Malaysia? I guess, we felt that there was a need for decent transportation options in a kind of existing ecosystem which did not offer that much at that time. Most people still had to rely on driving. And I think, our company mission in any city that we go into is kind of focused on three main areas, right? We believe that we're kind of pro-city, right? We want to kind of make the cities less polluted, less congested. We want to take cars off the road. We want to make parking less of an issue. We're also kind of pro what we call our partner drivers, whereby we want to create economic opportunities, right? And the third part is, obviously, we're pro riders. We want to ensure that, the riders get access to kind of safe and reliable rides.
The positive vibe that Uber has brought to Malaysia is generally in Malaysia, people think they have the certain images of taxi drivers in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of facilities and also the services they
And
were
also
provided.
in terms of security and safety as well.
Yeah, exactly. But then in Malaysia, especially, Uber sort of changed the mindset of people, how taxi services could be, improved and also revolutionized at the same time.
How in the beginning, how does Malaysians, how do they take or do they accept this services called Uber?
Sure. So let me kind of give you some insight into what you just said, right? So, I mean, just to clarify again, I think Uber is not a taxi service, right? But obviously there have been comparisons.
Right.
And, I guess for the fact that we offer a kind of really reliable and decent transportation option.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the Uber's kind of tagline, is our application tagline is everyone's private driver.
Yep.
And I think that's something that Malaysians can actually relate to, right? I think at some point, obviously, we would know someone or, a friend of a friend who would actually have their own private driver. And there's something that's actually quite widespread in, Southeast Asia, whether it's kind of, Kuala Lumpur or Jakarta or even Singapore, realize that people actually have their own individual private drivers, right? But the question we ask is why only limit it to a kind of exclusive group of individuals, right? Everyone should deserve to have access to, the equivalent of their own private driver, right? Or at least the same convenience, And we thought instead of rather, me, for example, as a real consumer, having to hire someone full-time, right now I can just download an app and I have the same convenience as kind of having my own private driver, right? That's the whole basic premise that we wanted to sell to Malaysians. And for them, I think they really understood it. Because if you tell them, hey, you know what a private driver is? I think most of them would say yes. Would you like one without having to pay for one full-time? I think the answer is yes.
So you don't fall under the cab services area?
No, we don't define ourselves as a taxi service.
So you don't have to pay for licensing and all that in terms of what the normal taxi drivers or taxi services would provide?
Well, first of all, we are an application. So what we do is facilitate rides, right? So all across the world, we have different products. For example, we have Uber Black here, where we work with licensed providers, right? We have also UberX, which is a mix of kind of licensed providers, as well as what we call a peer-to-peer ride-sharing service, right? And in some countries, we also have what we call Uber Taxi, whereby if the taxi ecosystem is actually robust enough, we actually extend our booking platform to taxis as well, right? So I think our focus here is actually not really on, whether we want to target taxis or for hire car services. Our focus here is just really one thing, right? We want to grow the kind of transportation pie using our technology. And most importantly, we want to create job opportunities. Right? We don't want to have to discriminate. Yeah.
Well, I never used Uber before, but you use it frequently.
Very.
But how do actually people use Uber? I know this is a very childish question, but like, how do you use it anyway? Like, do you just go on the application and then
very
say, I want to
simple.
go to point A to point B? That's it?
Very simple. So let me just give you a quick summary on how to use Uber, right? I've done this a few times. First of all, you can download the app, right? You go to Play Store or Apple Store, search for the Uber app, and you download it, right? After downloading it, there's a sign-up process, right? When you sign up, it will ask you to create a username, which is your email address, your password, and on top of that, as part of kind of verifying that you're a legitimate user, would actually ask you for your credit card or debit card details, right? Because we're a two-sided, kind of secure, closed marketplace, we need to ensure that both partner drivers are protected as well as the rider is protected, right? In that case, the kind of credit card acts as a kind of security verification measure. So once they validated that your credit card is actually a legitimate card, you now have access to what we call the kind of Uber request system. And there's a quick difference between us and I guess, some of the apps, right? First of all, you don't need to type in your address, right? By using your phone's kind of automatic GPS API, and once, for example, if your Wi-Fi settings are switched on, it will automatically kind of triangulate your location so that you just have to press the button and you'll know where you are, right? Number one. And number two, one thing that we believe in is that riders should not have to enter their destination data in order to get a ride. And let me ask you, why do you think that's the case?
I have no idea. Maybe in terms of safety?
Okay, Grace, what do you think that's the case?
before I started using Uber, when I used the other so-called taxi
Yeah.
service and app, I had to, type in my destination, and I was actually rejected frequently
Oh,
before.
really? Oh.
Yeah, it depends on how far is the distance or how short is the distance, and then it will show the estimated price. So it was very sort of struggle for me to find the taxis.
Ah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
I mean,
then-
Well, I have to apologize myself
Yeah.
because I have my own car. I haven't been any kind of taxi
Yeah.
services for I think forever.
yeah. Okay, so yes, I think Grace answered the question better than I could, right? Which is when you enter the destination data, right, that runs the risk that whoever's on the other side of the marketplace, right, for example, might be a taxi driver, might be a for hire driver, they might start discriminating rides based on the end location, right? Maybe they don't want to go to, for example, Subang when it's very jammed, or maybe they don't want to take short trips, for example.
Because it's cheaper for them. I mean, they are not.
Yeah,
making
or they
enough.
feel that it's not worth their time
Yeah.
for whatever reason. We don't want that to happen, and our principle is once again, everyone's private driver, right? Not just people who want to take long trips, private driver.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting because I think that's one of the major reasons people have
That's
complaints.
the attraction as
during,
well.
During rush hour, and also the
yeah.
fact that you are being discriminated because of the destination you want to go to. And I still remember on a personal experience, if I'm not mistaken, you told us before that one taxi driver actually kind of rejected your ride because the road towards that destination was jammed.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the one of the complaints so-called that we've been having in Malaysia. So by having this Uber, but then Uber had a different concept approach to the clients. That's when it was sort of quite fresh to us. So why not using Uber instead?
Ah.
Yeah.
So, but what are the major complaints that you have in the beginning? Because in the beginning you were still fresh. Maybe people are not really used to Uber. What were the initial complaints that you managed to address it?
Yeah, I think the question that a lot of people used to ask was, why is there no pre-booking? Right? And a lot of people like pre-booking. For example, if I wanted to go to the airport, I want to pre-book a car for tomorrow morning so that I know that at 7 a.m. a car, or 8 a.m. a car would be at the door, for example, waiting for me, right?
Right.
A lot of people like that certainty. But we always kind of have a philosophy that fundamentally, because we're a technology company, right, what we really bring in terms of value to both the partner drivers as well as riders is efficiency, right? And if you think about it, having to book 24 hours in advance is by no way efficient, right? Imagine if, for example, at home your tap, in order to have the water tomorrow morning, you have to book it 24 hours in advance. That's not great, right? That means there's something wrong with the public utilities. And we wanted to kind of train that mindset. And let me tell you a kind of interesting analogy. So let's take, for example, if I'm a driver, right? I'm going to pick, you up, for example, Arlene from your house tomorrow at 9 a.m. to go to the airport.
Right.
That means at 8 a.m., right, I need to start making my way towards your house. Right? That means at 7 a.m., I'm going to stop taking any other trip. Because at 7 a.m., if I take a trip, I might eat into that 8 a.m. time slot and I might be late. So that means from 7 a.m. onwards, I can't take any trips. Let's just say you're about 15, 20 minutes late. We start leaving your house at 9:20. We get to the airport by, say, 10:30. I can't take any rides from the airport. I come back to, say, town by about 11. That means from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., I've basically done only one trip, right? And our model is we want to increase that efficiency for our partner drivers. That means we want to give them more trips per hour. And, in a perfect system, right, whereby if we have enough drivers and enough riders on the platform, right, you will no longer have to pre-book. So pre-booking was number one problem that we always had questions asked. And the other one was why is my area, seemingly not covered, right? That's a very, very kind of common question. And to answer that, once again, we're kind of based on, the app is based on the idea of efficiency, right? So I'm sure a lot of people have actually tried asking the question before. So how many cars are there on the system, right? And my question back to them is, why are you asking me that question rather than asking me at a specific time in a specific area how many cars are there at any kind of given time? Because that's what really matters, right? If I told you I've got, say, I've got 13,800 cars in the system, but they're only on at, for example, 3 a.m., in areas where there's no one wanting these cars, doesn't matter, right? But what matters is having cars in the right areas at the right time. And we basically look at the data in terms of people who use the app. We know where they are, and we kind of position cars based on where most of the riders are, right? And eventually, exactly, as we scale, it's easier for us to grow to the other areas so that, we can actually extend our coverage.
We will take one short break. When we return, we will discuss more with our guests from Uber today.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
And of course, we are with our guest, Leon Foong from Uber. So, Grace, when it comes to Uber, what do you like about Uber exactly?
I've already mentioned a few attractions already, but one of them is, first, drivers are very friendly. And the second, cars are really clean.
I think the cleanliness is the one that you look forward to.
Well, it's the services that are provided. So that's the attraction that, we tend to compare with our previous experiences. So that's when we just go for Uber first, and Uber is available, then we'll go for other ones. Yeah.
So going to Grace's answer, right? Do you have some form of regulation or standards in all the Uber cars that you cannot have, like dirty cars, for example, or not maintain facilities within the car? But how do you monitor those kind of stuff?
And also, in addition, how do you monitor the drivers? Yeah.
So that's actually a great question. So I think in terms of kind of setting minimum standards, I think for any platform whereby your kind of main value is actually built upon trust, it's important to at least set a high bar, right? So for the drivers, any single driver that actually comes onto the platform needs to pass through a series of tests, right? These tests will include full background checks, criminal record checks, driving history, as well as actually a credit check, right? Should they pass these relevant checks, and obviously they manage to perform to a certain level in their assessment, they're actually allowed onto the system. But passing it once isn't just enough, right?
It's
all about maintaining the quality, and that's where the vehicle is very important as well, right? There is some level of basic kind of vehicle inspection, and obviously these vehicles are well kind of equipped, right, to be on the road, as because they're kind of licensed by the RTD. But what's actually more important is that I think there's something that a lot of people don't know, is that for the UberX system, right, for people who are using their own kind of individual vehicles, every time the car is actually on a trip, Uber, right, actually provides the partner driver with a kind of third-party contingent liability insurance policy, which makes sure that the passengers are covered during a trip, right? And that's actually very important because passenger safety is very important, right?
Of course.
And number two, a lot of people ask us, okay, you do a vehicle inspection. What makes you think that 2 weeks later or 2 months later the car's still going to be in good condition?
They're probably doing it for you rather than for Uber itself.
Exactly. But I think the answer to that is because we have a compulsory rating system that every single trip, in order for both the kind of rider and the driver to be able to move on to the next trip, they need to give a rating. And we believe that our best kind of source of kind of quality assurance is actually the riders, right? They're the ones giving the feedback. They're the ones who will alert us should, for example, the car be not up to a minimum standard or the driver not be up to a minimum standard. So actually, we want to thank the riders, right? Because they kind of providing these ratings is very important, and obviously they need to take it seriously.
Of course.
But how do you deal with a situation where, things like sexual harassment or any kind of violation towards the passenger take place? Is there a complaint mechanism on the spot, not later on? Or what kind of mechanism you provide for the passenger?
So the number one thing about the kind of Uber system is we provide chance for recourse. That means you can actually provide instantaneous feedback, and someone in our team will actually address that feedback, right?
24 hours?
Yes. Right. And normally our response time is actually under 6 hours. So that means if you write a ticket, on average, most likely you get a response within 6 hours, right? And actually the critical tickets would actually get funneled through to a more kind of important, will be flagged as a more important ticket, and the response time will be faster, right? But we're actually also focusing on other safety features that you begin to see kind of all around the world, right? For example, in India, there's what we call a safety net, whereby you can actually alert a safe group of contacts regarding your location and your ETAs at any given point. And we're also looking at potential features like a panic button.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was in India where there are news about Uber drivers raping women, or using that platform to actually prey for women. But in Malaysia, how stringent is it when it comes to choosing who would fit into the drivers, Uber drivers?
Yeah. So first of all, I think these kind of risk is industry wide, right? In any form of transportation, unfortunately, such risks are always present, and that's why we seek to use our technology to kind of minimize the risk of that, right? And we're actually 100% committed to making the platform as safe as possible. So first of all, we run all the kind of necessary checks on the drivers, as we said. Number two, we encourage riders to report any form of feedback that they have, right? Because then they are our best source of quality assurance, right? If they realize that something is unusual with a certain kind of driver's behavior, or vice versa, right? If a partner driver realizes that a rider is behaving in a slightly unusual way, they have the right to flag it and alert us, and we would necessarily carry out the investigations and assist any relevant authorities if necessary.
So the other question is, I've seen like the ratings, so we always give stars, and the maximum stars we can give is 5. Do you have a like ceremony, like sort of reward to the Uber drivers, to thank them, or best Uber drivers in a year kind of stuff?
Employee of the month,
in the company.
Yeah, so I mean, well, first of all, these drivers, they're actually our customers, right? In the sense that we're licensing our platform out to them,
right?
And
so
we actually treat them.
They are not your employees in a way, right?
No, we do not hire drivers. That is very clear. They are actually what we call partners,
right?
And in fact, we are the technology partners, and they are our customers, right? It's because they license our platform to access bookings. We believe in rewarding them, right? And actually, as you correctly pointed out, every month we have a series of kind of promos or perks that the kind of better performing partners actually can access. So, for example, like free meal vouchers or tickets. But I mean, I'm not allowed to say what this is. We're going to roll out an actually very, very exciting program for our partners, drivers, very, very soon. And, I can't tell you more details on this, but stay tuned. It's going to be very, very exciting.
Because Uber always have promotions and event, and that's another attraction then that the clients looking forward to have one like monthly. Yeah.
That's interesting. I have to go back to the taxi scene in Kuala Lumpur.
Right.
Do you feel that you are challenging the status quo when it comes to getting customers? Because the taxi drivers, this group of people have made complaints, especially in the early days of Uber in Malaysia, that you guys are taking their jobs. But what is your take on this?
Our priority right now is actually growing the market, right? And the way we believe in growing the market is actually offering a very efficient service, which is reliable, where waiting times are shorter, and whereby people who used to drive would actually consider not driving and actually taking an alternate form of transportation. So I think if you ask, for example, a lot of Uber riders, what did you used to take before Uber came about? I think they would tell you I used to drive, right? So in fact, I think we're actually competing from a very different pool. All our riders need to have at least a credit card and debit card, right? So for example, that already kind of shows you we're targeting a slightly different segment.
So not students, I suppose.
Well, students could have access to debit cards as well, right?
But
why we do that is because, once again, the integrity of the system is very important. We want to protect both the partner drivers and as well as the riders. So in that sense, we're actually growing a pie. And if you look at the numbers in terms of where Uber is present all around the world, statistically, we've actually proven that we've helped grow the taxi business. Like, take, for example, San Francisco, which is our kind of home city. Since we launched, the taxi business, I think, has actually grown very, very healthily, faster than ever.
And at the same time, well, by using Uber, right, they cannot cheat I mean, on the drivers at the same time. Some like passengers, like, oh, I don't have this much, so let's just take this amount. They can do that,
But
but
you don't
Uber,
involve money at all. During
yeah,
the whole
no
ride,
cash. So it's just directly deducted from your debit or credit card. So it's very like straightforward and very transparent.
That shows that it's very urban centric. Since majority of credit card holders, or I mean maybe not debit holder but credit card holders, are from the urban areas. But are you thinking of growing the market, quote unquote, towards areas that is not within the urban setting, like for example the outskirt of Kuala Lumpur, or places in rural areas?
100%. So I think we constantly look at ways in which we can actually complement public transport, right? In fact, we've done studies whereby we look at, for example, extension of train lines, transit lines, LRT lines, and we see where they actually terminate. And currently, our drop-offs already extend beyond these areas, which means that we actually facilitate the kind of complementary transportation service, right? Both the kind of first mile and the last mile. Obviously, in some, I guess, what we call underserved areas, whereby our coverage is not so reliable. The experience of trying to book a kind of vehicle might be slightly more difficult. But these are areas that we constantly want to work on, right? And I'll tell you what the limitations are, right? Our limitations are, number one, we need to create awareness in that specific area and actually increase penetration of people who actually use the app, number one. And number two, what's people downloading the app if there aren't enough kind of partner drivers in that area, right? So yeah, I think we encourage that, if anyone identifies an area which they feel is underserved, to actually come onto our platform, which is partners.uber.com, and actually sign up so that we can actually extend, the services to these areas.
Could it be also the awareness of Uber is not as highly penetrative in terms of areas outside of Kuala Lumpur? You mentioned that if you are in Bangsar, that means if you are a driver, you will constantly get messages of people wanting your ride. But if you are in area, let's say Rawang, or any other place that is like 2 hours away from Kuala Lumpur, people might not even heard of Uber. What are you doing to try to maybe not educate but create awareness?
So I think you have to be aware that kind of Uber is a marketplace, and constantly as being a kind of marketplace, you need to manage both supply and demand, right? And one thing that we really value is what we call the rider experience, right? We don't want the people to have the app and open it up and not see any vehicles, right? That is incredibly frustrating, and that's the reason why we haven't kind of actively promoted, to say, the Uber brand in certain areas. But when we're confident that in those areas, that when you open up the app, you can actually see a car, and the arrival times are actually under 6 minutes, then we're actually confident that we're going to do some kind of promotion.
So that means I can expect an Uber taxi driver or an Uber driver in Rawang very soon, without waiting for too long.
I think if you can get me more partner drivers in that area, certainly.
We'll take another short break. When we return, we will discuss more on the Southeast Asian skill of Uber. That's all.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Welcome back. This is Grace.
So we are back again on our discussion regarding on revolutionizing the cab services in Malaysia, especially, and we are of course with Leon Foong from Uber.
And we just mentioned shortly how Uber is going to be like in Southeast Asia. I mean, Malaysia is the market is growing up quite rapidly. But how about Southeast Asia? How is the marketing there, or where are the hotspots in Southeast Asia?
So I think Southeast Asia is a very kind of strategic market for us, right? I think Kuala Lumpur was the second city in Southeast Asia to be launched. Shortly after that, there was Manila, Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, and even now we're in some of the what we call destination cities. So such as, should you like to go to Bali or Phuket, you can open up the very same app once you arrive and actually book a car. We believe that that's actually a huge value add, because when we look at the data, a lot of our riders actually travel to different cities and use Uber actually in different cities, right? And that's the reason why I think having a kind of strong footprint, not just in Southeast Asia, but across other parts of APAC is very important as well. So if we're talking about kind of Australia, China, India, we have presence in multiple cities. in each of those countries, and I think that's very important, right? And so let's talk about Southeast Asia. I think some of the markets that are doing incredibly well, right? I think Ho Chi Minh, for example, Hanoi, Bangkok, Singapore is obviously one of our most mature markets, and I think Jakarta is a market which we find very interesting, just because
A lot of machet, is it?
well, I think right. I mean, they have a really good taxi system, right, in Jakarta, in the form of Bluebird, and for us, we respect that. We actually admire that, and we always ask ourselves, all right, if the bar has really set that eye, how do we kind of almost create a kind of service which actually could match the kind of high qualities of the industry that's already been set. And I think one way to deliver that is actually through efficiency, right? And efficiency, once again, I always mention this point, efficiency to us means something very simple. It means doing more trips per hour, means spending less time waiting in the car empty for the driver. It means shorter waiting times for the rider. And because of that, right, the product will actually become cheaper. Right, I think you guys are familiar with the kind of budget airline model,
right,
whereby utilization is higher, right? You can always price more competitively.
So you want to be competitive in terms of the pricing in comparison with the Bluebird services, which has been very, very efficient, I think, and quite good as well in terms of the maintenance of the car. I mean, I took when I was in Jakarta for a work trip for a month, in fact. I took Bluebird almost every day. In fact, we have this policy: don't take any other taxi except for Bluebird, and it's so reliable. So yeah, that's true. The bar has been set really high.
Yeah.
But so you're going to use the strategy of market of scale in terms of trying to be more competitive in terms of pricing.
I think good question, right? So when we talk about competition, we don't necessarily always look at what the market price is at, right? I think if you try and really understand our pricing model, it's actually based on cost, right? We see what the kind of individual cost is for a ride based on the distance and the time cost, and we attribute what we call a kind of suggested margin, right? That we believe that will be a good fare to kind of charge for certain services, and I think once again, it boils down to efficiency, right? We like to challenge our systems to deliver data that helps drivers get more efficient, right? I think a lot of people like to ask us in the event, for example, of the recent announcement of taxi price hikes, for example, in Malaysia. A lot of people,
GST. Does it even affect Uber?
Yes, I mean, it does affect the industry, right? A lot of people always ask, right, with GST coming in, with taxis raising their prices by 40%, right? That's been the kind of big issue. What are you guys going to do, right? First of all, I would like to just make it clear that we're in a marketplace whereby the pricing is always a function of supply and demand, right? But my answer to this is we always ask ourselves, the first question is, how much more efficient can we be, right? Because if we can be more efficient, it means that drivers can still make the same amount of money while consumers don't have to pay more, right? That's the number one question that we always ask. And I think in any market across Southeast Asia, we try and kind of ask that question. Obviously, in markets like Manila and Jakarta, I mean, we know traffic there is very, very bad.
Very bad.
Let's put it this way. If Kuala Lumpur is bad, I think some of these markets are more challenging. And unfortunately, traffic is probably one of the biggest enemies of efficiency. And in those markets, we might have to reconsider if we can't hit certain targets. Yeah.
In terms of types of cars, the pricing is also different.
Yeah.
And is it the same throughout the Southeast Asia, or they have a different types of cars, as in they have Uber X, Uber Black, and Lux? Is it only for Malaysia, or also like Philippines or Vietnam, they have the same system?
We believe in choice. And in many of the different cities, yes, you have both kind of Uber Black,
right,
which is our kind of flagship product, and you have Uber X, which is the low-cost product.
Do you get into trouble with other governments in Southeast Asia when Uber starts to function in any of the countries there?
Well, I think to answer your question is that when we start to scale, we do get attention from the regulatory bodies. And I think that's natural, obviously, because as we start to kind of bring the benefits of more efficient transportation to the masses, the regulatory bodies are meant to be regulating kind of transport, would obviously want to have a conversation. And to answer your question, we're actually engaging regulatory bodies across different cities, and we believe that working with them will be very beneficial.
So in that sense, do they have certain kind of rules that you need to abide to, like maybe you need to have some form of license for your drivers, for example?
I think what we realize is that a lot of the kind of regulations in many different cities were written kind of pre-days of smartphones, right? No one kind of really anticipated the amount of kind of efficiency gain and the amount of data and amount of kind of things you can do with technology, right? As a result of that, I think the conversation that we always have is, okay, look at the current technology environment. Let's try and anticipate how innovation is going to affect this industry. Let's sit down and let's really understand, right? What is what we call safety-based regulation? What is it all about, right? First of all, we want consumers to be as safe as they can, right? That's the number one priority of any regulators across all cities. Is public interest, right? Number one. Number two, right, is how do we protect the economics of any what we call driver who wants to participate in this industry. Number two, right? And I think we like to have that conversation, right? So in all the different cities, we're actually engaging the regulators to see how we can focus on what we call smarter regulations.
And in Southeast Asia, you can't help but to listen people meaning governments talking about ASEAN Economic Community, but a lot of the general public are still very much unsure like what exactly it's all about. But coming from the business perspective, like do you see ASEAN Economic Community have some form of easing the businesses for something like Uber in Southeast Asia in any way?
In terms of, creating job opportunities, yes, for sure. Because anyone can join as long as they meet the requirements of what Uber is looking for. And then I've seen not only in Malaysia, but I've talked to a few of my friends in Indonesia and Singapore, and then they seem to be quite positive about all these services there.
But that's the thing, right? Because you guys are an app platform, and your platform is not physically in Southeast Asia, except for you as the representative for Malaysia, for example. But for an economic community like ASEAN Economic Community, it some of its opportunity or benefits might not be even related to the kind of business that you want to expand in Southeast Asia. It seems like there's a disconnection here.
I love this question. So I personally am a fan of economics.
Yeah.
And let's just talk about Malaysia, right? A country like Malaysia, whereby I think fundamentally in terms of what the key challenges or hurdles in terms of offering a cost-efficient, reliable transportation option is obviously the cost of the vehicle, right? And we obviously understand that vehicle taxes, for example, in Malaysia is on the high side, right? Obviously, if you purchase a locally assembled vehicle, that's a different issue. But once again, you want to talk about ASEAN, right? I think a big trade is obviously trade mobility and kind of free flow of kind of, goods and services, right?
Right.
In that sense, I think if we were to truly kind of maximize the benefits of ASEAN, I think vehicle costs would go down, right? I think eventually we see efficiency, both in terms of kind of free flow of, say, both manufacturing raw materials as well as assembled products. I think the cost of vehicles will only go down, right? I think as cost of vehicles go down, tell me, every single person benefits. And who can actually facilitate that, right? I think applications, for example, to facilitate that, right? Because we create a kind of sudden increase in demand for certain types of vehicles, and we can actually do deals which allows, for example, the kind of free flow of certain, for example, assembled models, and actually bring down the cost of cars, right? That's actually one fundamental goal.
It might work in countries like maybe Thailand because they have quite, their cars there are cheaper and they are the manufacturers of cars also for a lot of really big brands. But Malaysia, one of the very few countries where the automotive industry is a very protectionist, it takes a protectionist direction towards the automotive industry. Like, is this one of the main hurdles of Uber?
No, I think I see it as an opportunity, right? So one of my personal favorite cars is actually the Perodor Myvi. Right? I love it. I believe you drive one as well, right?
I drive one as well.
And in Malaysia, I would say it's probably one of the most widely seen cars around, right? I mean, go to any car park and you probably see a Myvi. Why is that not the case in Singapore, right? Why is that not the case in Vietnam? Why is that not the case in other parts of ASEAN, as you talked about? I mean, these are the other kind of regions where we have a good presence in. And obviously, for example, we would love to, consider or explore options of bringing, for example, Malaysian manufactured vehicles into other markets, right? We'd like to be able to facilitate the conversation.
Are governments listening right now?
Yeah,
Government.
So
yeah, this is definitely one angle that we really want to focus on, right?
Yeah.
Because as part of being a technology company, we want to revolutionize not just the industry but the ecosystem,
Right.
And we realize that once again, I always go back to the point of efficiency. There are certain efficiency gains that I still see that could be done in the kind of automobile ecosystem, and I think using our technology, using our kind of citywide network, we could bring that efficiency gain.
I think you're going to make Tun Mahathir really proud saying those kind of words.
well, perhaps we should go for ASEAN Uber or Uber ASEAN.
But there's another question also. I mean, this is more on the environmental side of it. More cars on the road, meaning more pollution, more congestion.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of other businesses where you can actually reduce people reliance on cars, but more on public transportation, for example, like buses and all?
So one product that we want to roll out in pretty much every single city, being our kind of not eventual vision, being part of our vision, is Uber Pool. So Uber Pool is our kind of car pool product that's been launched in kind of San Francisco and New York. And what it allows people to do is it matches basically two riders who don't know each other, who want to go from, say, two different places to two different drop-off locations. It basically matches them together, right, into one ride to basically save them on the eventual, what I call the trip fare, and actually help the driver make more money. Right? We have an algorithm which actually automatically does that. And once you actually manage to pool, right, rides together, what you see is a pretty magical effect, right, which is the number of passengers, trips per vehicle immediately goes up, right? So right now, I mean, even if you look at public transport, the average kind of passenger per car is probably like 2.5, right, or 2. But with Uber Pool, we can get that potentially up to 3, right, or even 3.5 if we could pull more people together. And when you start seeing that kind of magical effect whereby rather than having kind of single driver vehicles or single passenger vehicles, you have kind of shared vehicles whereby, you have 2 or 3 passengers sitting in one car, you're actually taking cars off the road during peak hours. This is when it really matters, right? Right? Taking cars off the road, not just during any hours, but during peak hours. That eases traffic. And number 2, right, what's the number one cause of traffic that we realize all across cities is when there's a sudden change in the moving speed of the vehicles, right? Whether it's a traffic light, whether it's a junction. And that's why there's been debates whether roundabouts are more efficient than traffic lights, but let's not even go into that, right? We know for a fact that double parking or even triple parking is really bad for traffic, right? We see that, for example, in Kuala Lumpur quite a lot. And imagine if we tell people, nowadays, as long as you use this transportation option, you don't have to worry about parking. Don't double park. Don't triple park. Can you imagine how much better traffic would be?
That's true. So that's a very great point, actually.
Yeah, and then that's actually something new in Malaysia, like Uber or taxi pooling even, and perhaps there will be some kind of comments from the clients whether we can actually trust the drivers after all by having the pooling services, because when it comes to pooling, we don't know that who will be in the taxi
But
after all.
The funny thing about Malaysia, government used to echoed, the idea of pooling, but it never really take off. It never
I
really
haven't
worked.
seen one actually.
In the past, the government did. So it's one of the
we have a
initiatives.
theory, right? Which is that's the reason why we launched UberX, is because we realized that a lot of people in Malaysia already own vehicles, right? And we want to increase utilization of these vehicles. And part of the secret sauce to kind of Uber Pool is to have basically a lot of volume, right? When you have a lot of volume, pooling becomes possible.
Right.
And we have the technology to do that, right? We understand exactly how to optimize so that by minimizing the kind of inconvenience factor to the driver, right? So that what I mean by inconvenience factor is, let's just say I have to pick up 2 separate passengers. I don't want to have to drive 2 or 3 kilometers extra, right? Maybe driving 500 meters extra is okay, right? We want to kind of minimize that inconvenience factor while maximize the number of different people I can pick up in one single journey. And actually, we've kind of done that in a lot of the cities now, and that's actually part of my vision for Malaysia,
yeah.
right? But I think before that, my idea, as we kind of talked about, is to kind of keep on growing UberX, extend it to more of these underserved areas, complement more of these kind of public transportation areas. That way, when you have more overlap in terms of where people want to get picked up from to where they want to get dropped off, that's when the magic of Uber Pool happens.
So it's like the future plan. Yeah.
Well, I think the future is going to come very soon. Yeah.
You could be like, matching not just like the pooling services, but also maybe Tinder as well.
Well, I've heard that quite a few times before. No comment.
So that's all from us today. Do you have any personal message on Uber, maybe for Malaysians if they are not aware of Uber?
Yeah, sure. I think, for those who are not aware of the application, I'll suggest they download it, give the service a shot. And for those who are interested in kind of new economic opportunities, they can obviously go to our website, which is partners.uber.com, and find out more about these opportunities.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Leon.